Welcome back to History Class with Dr. W. We're continuing our discussion of democracy and American culture from 1820 to 1840. And in this lecture, we're going to talk about the rise of the second party system. In the election of 1832, Andrew Jackson confronted Henry Clay. But there was also a third candidate whose name was William Wirt, who was a lawyer who had actually argued the Cherokee cases that we talked about in the previous lecture before the Supreme Court. He represented the anti-Masonic Party, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. In the presence of this third party, it is thought adversely affected Clay and may have swung the outcome of the election to Andrew Jackson. So the anti-Masons emerged in New York, opposing the powerful Masons, a secret fraternal organization, and you see some of the paraphernalia here kind of representing this, which had long ties to political elites. There were secret handshakes and door knocks and all kinds of rituals and things associated with it. Again, you see here they're wearing the kind of paraphernalia. The one eye over the pyramid is a famous Masonic symbol, which you see actually on the dollar bill. The anti-Masons were never a threat to win the presidency or many prominent offices, but they were an innovative group and significant because they mark the first time that a third party has had a real impact of any kind. But they also brought in innovations like a national nominating convention and the adoption of an official party platform, which clarified the party's position on important issues. There were other third parties in this era as well. Well, third or fourth or fifth parties, I suppose. One it derived from workers. They were called the workies, oddly enough, and advocated for various kinds of workers' rights. Another evolved around the idea of inheritance taxes, which smacked of royalty and inherited money. And so those advocating this cause believed that inheritance should essentially be abolished or heavily taxed so that the wealth would recirculate into the community. One of the central issues in the election in 1832 came to be the renewal of the charter of the National Bank. Figures like Henry Clay and Daniel Webster believed that this could be an issue that could lead to Jackson's defeat in the election because they thought enough Americans supported the bank, and Andrew Jackson, of course, opposed the bank. So Henry Clay approached Nicholas Biddle, who was the head of the Bank of the United States, to request an early renewal of the charter in 1832, thus making it a key election issue. And Clay thought that Jackson might veto the renewal, and then Clay could use that against Andrew Jackson in the election. Andrew Jackson famously said, "The bank, Mr. Van Buren," he was speaking to Martin Van Buren, "the bank, Mr. Van Buren, is trying to kill me, but I will kill it." And in fact, that's essentially what happened. Congress renewed the bank's charter in 1832. Jackson vetoed it, but Congress was unable to rally the votes to renew it over Jackson's veto, meaning that the bank was, in fact, going to be ground out of existence by Andrew Jackson. So Clay thought that things were working to his favor up to that point, but in fact, Jackson managed to win the country over to his side when he gave a famous speech known as the Bank Veto Speech, not only explaining why he opposed the bank, but laying out a broad plan and vision for a more democratic America. In the speech, Jackson attacked, quote, "the rich and powerful, who too often bend the act of government to their selfish purposes." And so he uses the speech to make a broad appeal to the common masses across the country. And in fact, this became a huge kind of vaulting point for his campaign to win re-election in 1832. In this campaign of 1832, Jackson's supporters depicted and described him as Old Hickory, this champion of the common man. Those who were opposed to him described him rather as King Andrew, a pseudo-monarch who had drawn so much power into his own control that he was no better than a king. Whatever one thought of those depictions, it was clear that Clay's strategy of making the bank the central issue in this election had backfired, and that Old Hickory had rallied plenty of support behind himself and that issue. In the election, Jackson defeated Clay by some 200,000 votes and close to 4-1 in the Electoral College. Saying that, though, Jackson's victory mobilized his opponents and led to the creation of a new political party, the Whigs, which we're going to be talking about in the next lecture. Following his re-election, Andrew Jackson might have just let the bank die a passive death and not done more about it. Instead, he actively sought to dismantle the bank and ordered the Secretary of Treasury to remove all funds from the bank, a process that took several steps for him to accomplish, including firing a number of people who weren't able to do it for him. No previous president had gone to these kind of steps, and Jackson, claiming that his re-election gave him a popular mandate to dismantle the bank. Again, his enemies became so incensed over this that they began to rally around the cause, not only of defeating Jackson, but opposing his actions. Andrew Jackson, in their view, was becoming no better than King George III. So in the next lecture, we'll talk about the evolution of the next political parties in American history, including the Whigs.